Hello everyone. The title of today's talk is Listening to Nature's Beautiful Secrets. And what I mean by this is not like, the childish version of secrets. Oh, I know a secret, I'm not going to tell you. But this is the secret where it's as if before you knew anybody and you were anybody, that view of you, again looking at a greater possibility of its own reality of the present. What that means is that when I looked at nature, I looked at a lens which was how society, or certain aspects of society, of course we are not pointing fingers here, but if there are fingers being pointed, it is suggesting to not see the tip of the finger, rather to see that the stars that it is the finger is pointing to. When we observe ourselves, there comes a moment, especially in my life, there came a moment where I did not want to be in... The unknown became interesting to me, not because it was a response and reaction to my environment, but mainly because I wondered what is there to life when you are giving your whole life in every moment. Meaning that there came this curiosity that I understood that who I am, the uniqueness of my design is here for a certain presence. I, out of all this stuff in the world, have manifested in this framework, with this kind of face, with this kind of voice. However, what is it about the presence of the individual which seems to have always been collective? In an instant, there came a knowing where it was as if before you had a chance to even move your head to look at the clock, to look at the watch on your hand, you would, for a minute, before even rationality has opened the door, just be in a knowing where, how do I say it? You know where you are, but you want to be there again. This kind of dynamic of thought, I find Mr.Within finds, has come in the minds of anybody who has explored the unknown. The question of existence itself. Who is the one who is asking the question? Who is the seer? And if you were to ask the grace of Sri Ramana Maharshi, you would see that our inquiry of meditation, he would say meditation is your true nature. So if the purpose of an act is to explore your true nature, does that mean the awareness to your true nature is always possible? When we see others who've done great acts, does it seem that it's possible for us too? So it seems the system does not need to fight itself, but embrace itself. Gosh, we're not, back in the day, people were violent. Now there's no violence. Gandhi made it clear. Gandhi's life was like, humanity, no violence. And we're like, yes, Mr. Gandhi, yes. Nature has a voice that speaks through your whole being. So it cannot be just bound to language. So if you heard other people speak ever in your life, and there came a point where you just heard someone speak, begin to see beyond what you have seen. And that requires your attention to be in the novelty of the present moment. Guys, there was a time where I was actually, I can't believe it now. I was actually looking at museums. I'm like, oh, this museum looks nice, this museum looks nice, you know. Then it just, dawned upon me that why am I trying to go somewhere when I'm already somewhere? So instead of trying to change the world, I began to see, what am I to even change things? And this went deep. It was as if the ring of truth was thrown to kiss the ocean's feet. And in that depth, it was very interesting, guys. I want to say it practically and very simply. It was let me say it like this. Doubt does not exist in that state of consciousness. There is no doubt. Because, not because, it's not recorded. I mean, doubt, you need to sometimes doubt things, of course, based on the reality your focus is. But I'm speaking in a very certain of a mystical context here. Mystical meaning beyond the senses. That means in an instant I knew, and in that knowing there never needed to be a shape to know. Just like how you have a great ability to understand how you are full, how you are something, just like how you can go look in the mirror and be like, all right, I know what that is, And of course, very playfully, you begin to see that the value in human life is not what others are doing for you, and it's not what you think you have to do for yourself because your conditioning has been in a certain way. Rather, it's about sincerity. It's about you, before getting a job, seeing, why are you working an idea? Why are you letting that kind of a structure? There's so many things in this world, right? So to have a problem, you could just change your gaze to another reality. Do you know? And that means movement and involvement, and in honest engagement, there is the beacon of sincerity lit by starlight. Don't think the concept, some people look at religion and are like, it's very, 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 I find a bit ignorantly, are like, oh, look, they're all following something. Oh, that's, why they're following, And at the same time, don't understand that they are following every definition that the world has already defined and they've, in a sense, accepted. All of us have flaws because we are an evolving species, I mean, of course, who wants the perfect life? That's ridiculous. I don't want the perfect life. The perfect life is a nice box, but some beings want to break our boxes. They want to, they're tired of just moving things and moving from one reality and just thinking that they're only that. No, multidimensionality, it is now time. Let children's fantasies develop into the greatest inspirations. And if we can accept it in regards to scientific frameworks, not scientific frameworks, of course, I don't want to, again, point fingers, but I want to say in regards to a certain way it has to be acknowledged. We want irrationality and rationality to stop fighting, because the awareness to both is the intelligence of the being. You are not a bad guy, you're not a good guy, And guess what? It's like bad guy and good guy, you can't separate them. So how can you have a good guy if there's no one bad in the world? How can you have a bad guy if there's no one good in the world? You have human experiential and existential intelligence, and it's natural, and biology, before it needs to be read in books, the being needs to observe the life that is. Your greatest teacher is the direct experience that is just showing you the vastness of life. To find the trail again, In causality, there is only remembrance. Nature's beautiful secrets don't have to be a story. They don't have to be something which can then be scrutinized with the infinite tool of imagination. Do you know? Mr.Within finds that the most immediate symbol and sign and communication of a health of a person, if you were the healer called humanity and you just looked around and you wanted to see how the human species can be healed to its greatest advancement, you'd see that the problem maker is to blame, but this problem maker is not external. And that is why you're not just a player in a game. The nature of this world is innately what is within you, and what is within you is within an existential intelligence. So we are all wearing the garbs of existence. We all exist, but the awareness to our existence sometimes is not coherent. Sometimes we can't hear our fellow man because we're too busy hearing our own past, and the past speaks very loud. So that's why I think many meditators were, some guy was probably, the Buddha was looking at a flower, very nice flower, and suddenly the past kept talking about suffering. And so the Buddha was like, gosh, I need to sit down, I can't let this past disturb me, oh gosh, why is this past talking so much, And of course, the exploration and the light that Buddha brought, its story is one where you should really look it up. It's an amazing story. But it's the truth can be seen in all that is true. And once it becomes really true for yourself that you're a being of possibility rather than a being of impossibility, what that means is all day you're not hearing, oh, this is impossible, this is impossible, this is impossible, but rather you're developing the greatest possibilities, but also respecting the past. When I it's kind of very odd. I'm 23 at this age. And I see that. How some, how would I say it? I see sometimes parents telling their kids, listen, show some respect and whatnot, and then I begin to see, and I see, no, kids are not showing respect to their parents, and after they don't show respect to their parents, it's as if like a part of them is wounded. So what does a wounded individual do? Try to show its scars, and in showing its scars, somehow a blade has been found and there's a disguise. We must get rid of this sense of guilt. Guilt is like some unnecessary thing. Guilt, that concept is bothering people, So stop saying you're guilty. Even a lot of our words, a lot of our language seems to have turned into luggage. Nature's most beautiful secrets. It is not something that could be written in a book at times, and not even sometimes completely communicated through a talk or a lecture. It is your knowing. It is your intuition. There's just this feeling in you that if suddenly they threw you on an island and you were like, gosh, what do I have to do? This effort would originate in you to keep. Survival will immediately make you prioritize the need for the most important knowledge in your reality. And so it is very crucial to understand this, because this understanding is profound. It is now a great moment to share with you that nature's wisdom and nature's grace and nature's truth is much more omniscient than man's. In the omniscience of how every idea, everything that you have separated, made into a duality, can immediately integrate, blend, you are developing yourself beyond knowledge, because that's the newest update. Because that is the next thing that we must begin teaching our machines. We are the higher beings. We are the guides of our technology. Our human nature is advanced and it is present here now. That means just like how I looked in the mirror and saw a unique face, I wondered if within those eyes there was non-existence. But that non-existence turned into a transparency of even the question. So why even question non-existence? And I immediately became a being of the now. That means there was no doer, but how my breath was raising the tower of life. And I truly understand the Tower of Babel, the Tower of Babylon. Because they were beings. The story is they're trying to reach the heavens, and the god's like, yo, these guys are building something, yo, and they, I don't know, so they make them in a way where they give them different languages. That's the story. Meaning, the fingers need to remember the palm, for the palm already knows it's the body, the whole body. That means me saying that only these sounds I'm making is truth, and just these images on the paper is truth, is a different level of truth compared to me telling you, go within, go observe your senses. That means no one is disturbing you. There's a lot of, everyone is a free being. Your freedom is questionable because the sense of self that is maintaining the objectivity wants to constantly maintain the objectivity. But wisdom suggests that sometimes the best way of learning how to use a tool is not to just jump into it ignorantly and just try to copy what the other person did, but rather to put your first attempt just on pause and just go back and become an observer of the practice. That means sometimes I have looked at certain art forms and there has been no me. And then it was as if I was the omniscience of any possibility. And this knowing is what nature has given you, because the nature of your being is also being in the nature of all that is. So what that means is I may think I'm alone, but Gaia always whispers in my ear, because I am made out of the elements of both objective consideration and a subjective projection only based on the objective thing. It's only a holographic projection because you're only thinking, you still don't know if you're an object or not. You must explore your consciousness beyond the objectivity, and don't feel it. You feel your intuition. This is about activation. What that means is Mr. Within wants to share anything that will contribute in you remembering who you are. You remembrance, you don't need, it's not an external activity. It's not like you go, hey buddy, can you help me remember? You can ask, and someone could make up their own story and you'd be like, oh shit, I don't remember, so that story is probably true. And that's how many people are accepting their realities. That's why many people, they see Superman and for some reason feel they're not super. They are not super. And so every man has very supernatural abilities, but this supernatural ability is not for an idea. And that's why the beings who are able, there are many great able beings on this plane of existence which have an ability with their attention to change. I mean, you think that there's, there's movies make it as if extraterrestrials and stuff, are the next, different in consciousness or whatever. They're the higher beings, but the higher being is not sometimes, like even in the human species there are higher beings, meaning that every being is aware of their attention differently, and those who really explore their attention sincerely, it's as if they become humble and they take the mystic's garb. That means the mystic, regardless of what he hears, because he's seeking to be the glare beyond temporal dualistic understanding of sensory perception, infinity must be brought down to earth. Meaning it must be remembered. That means we do not touch those stars externally. We remember internally. We are starlight. And as the memories of starlight become not a fantasy, but a poet's pointing towards a limitless sky. There are many horizons unexplored. There are many ways that communication is amplifying. So our technology and our biological programming, it's as if these two different systems are now integrating, and we have to save the world at the same time. We're all trying to save the world at the same time. So what happens is there is this immense priority to find greatness, but in a certain shape. If you make your greatness shapeless, you are always great. Because it is not your greatness you're seeking. You are seeking the greatness of your world, because that's what Mr.Within finds. We as human beings are temporal, meaning that we're here for a certain amount of time and then, we transition. We'll visit something else, But now that we are here, we must not try to all become, one kind of archetype of success, but rather get rid of the word success. There is no success, there is no failure. I don't know what kind of a class act this has been, but it's ridiculous. Stop seeing it. Your humanity is not here to just feel success in one snapshot of a moment. Your inspiration is the expansion of the ability of humanity. That is how you must envision. Because that is the next self of selves. That we thought we were talking to ourselves. How do you understand someone? You first are aware of what you know, and it's your filter of knowing. That means sometimes when you look at a stranger and you might be condemning that stranger, you must realize that if there was a moment that never had to be like that, there was no need to individualize and then chain the reality to its rule. Every being must be free. I look at insects, and birds and animals in nature, And we don't tell spiders, where to make its web. We don't tell it has to go get this certain thing. Man attempted to survive because the consciousness was in a shock. Guys, this is insane, but just like there's physical, like comets and asteroids, that could have potentially hit Earth, there are many subtle ones. And these subtle ones are self-awareness, consciousness. And this consciousness is present. And as it's present, just like how you are born into this face, you will see this face behind it has been, there is also a very unique design to your remembrance. But you must go further. That means liberation is not just one supernatural experience, but rather the sincerity of the awareness to what needs to be done in your life now and is being done as you are the omniscience that allows. You know, just like I see iTunes updates, I was like, how interesting and how amazing, how awesome would it be if just like iTunes updates, which happen so frequently, we had updates of the thoughts that the human, let's say society is acknowledging. You know, I feel society is starving from the greatness of the natural world because it is not seeing it, you know. And how ridiculous would it be that there was life here and you did not explore it? But how ridiculously beautiful would it be if you see that the presence the intelligence present within you is the intelligence that is present within all that is. But we are not trying to make an idea to become other ideas. We are trying to say you were not an idea. You were not a name. These are, as Mr. Within sees language as clothing, as garment, you know, but it is garments of reality. That means sometimes they could be veils. That means sometimes there's some words that I just see and I'm like, gosh, where does this word come from? And I just explore it, and it's as if even though I don't know, you know, I don't know where the word comes, but my playfulness, it's as if how I become conscious of all that I'm considering unconscious is I'm exploring the consciousness. Self-inquiry is one of the greatest teachings, you know, and I didn't get it in school. Gosh, if I got it, you know, I mean, I'm really happy. We made mirrors, you know, we have mirrors everywhere, you know, in every bathroom or whatnot, you know, but if they made mirrors of ideas where we could see what ideas we're having in an instant. So what is a mirror of ideas which could immediately reflect back to you the ideas you are? It is self-inquiry, self-exploration. It is the exploration of your consciousness, and in doing so, there have been many sages in the past. Humanity has a very great lineage. But if you're following the stories, you still do not see humanity. Humanity is beyond stories, and that is why we must be selfless. That is why we must respect every voice, and if nature calls and our moment shifts, we shall be the wind. That changed to change itself. I would like to share a passage from this very interesting book called Spiritual Gems. And it kind of begins like this, and some of the viewers might find this kind of new, but in my intuitive flows, I just trust what needs to be read, so I just read what needs to be read. So when you listen, just take all sounds in context rather than questioning the sound. Because if you're too busy trying to understand what I'm saying, you're not really hearing it as an observer. That means sound is always performing. It is man who must remember the depth of his knowledge. And so may we gracefully continue, because this passage, what I want to read, is very interesting. For God is the very most subtle, and He is the very most powerful indeed. He is subtlety and He is power. In general, the light's divine purge. Jafar said, when gnosis enters hearts, it removes from them all demands and all desires, so that there is no place in the heart for anything other than God, Most High. The light is a fire that burns away all that is unlike it. Jafar said, he, in brackets, Moses, saw a fire, an indication of the divine lights. For he saw light in the form of the fire. When he drew near to it, the lights of holiness pervaded him, and the robes of intimacy encompassed him. The ignited fires of love and gnosis in the hearts. Get rid of this part and continue. And what I would really like to share is that, guys, just visualize this moment. I mean, we don't really have the technology at this point to create a time machine. I think we do. We just need to figure it out. But at the same time, if we were to suddenly go back and become part of the omniscience that observed Moses, it's just hear this passage. When he drew near to it, the lights of holiness pervaded him. It's as if he went towards his truth. He went towards the absolute revelation through his unknown. This is a might beyond words. And it says, and the robes of intimacy encompassed him. Meaning, it was such an intimate experience where it was no longer Moses, the idea, the name, the personality. It was the messenger who remembered the message. It's a very beautiful thing, because in humanity we must explore the greatest possibilities, and not all the greatest possibilities are outside. Sometimes the greatest possibilities are walking all around you. The human family, very interestingly, has the ability to lift itself up. You know, I saw this YouTube video. Nowadays, it is a very beautiful thing to see, actually. Certain very wise senior citizens. And of course, there's an aspect to all beings that is ageless. But it was very interesting. Senior citizens were teaching kids in foreign countries through Skype English. And it was as if that lady may not have been an MIT professor, or maybe she might have. But you would see what she knows, she teaches and she gives. Because as we mature, as we are walking towards where we must walk next to, we begin to see life is breathing for life. This air is going through the lungs of all that is human, you know. And before you carry the weight of any flag, carry the flag of your heart and see that you are here to be kind and compassionate to all beings. But this kind and compassion does not mean you have to not be aware, not be present. Kindness and compassion are not shaped. They emanate from the absolute that is within you. They are great, profound existential intelligence. And you know, for Mr. Within, before really I had found Mr. Within, I was seeking what my story was seeking, what the character in my story of life was seeking. That means at first in my life I was some kind of character, some kind of story, character and story. Oh, I'm born here, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this. And suddenly, when I remembered myself as the intelligence of the storyteller, it shifted. And I began to see life as very, in quotations, perfectly weaved. But it is not of a individual perfection. It's not the perfection of the drop. It is the perfection of the stream, which is leading to the rivers that pass many falls to reunite in divine reunion with the ocean of absolute consciousness and absolute love. The bridge is made. The Tower of Babel, it was very clear. They could not rebuild it. They could not build it externally. Some force was limiting it. But internally, man is existential force. And perhaps, as a very profound green gentleman said in a very interesting film, do or do not, there is no try. And in self-inquiry, do or do not, there is no try. Nature is within you. Nature is your calling. The pilot of consciousness navigates as the plane of existence. We are now alive at a time where many human beings are exploring themselves beyond their ideas. That means you may think that your friends or your just any person you meet is just like the person they are around you. But you see, no, we are not ideas, we are not just a certain personality, we accept certain personalities and solidify, but the essence of water has an ability to be frozen, but also has an ability to melt and be fluid, and it also has an ability to evaporate. That means there are many aspects to the human being. Don't think that just by you learning the names for your body parts, you know what a human being is. A human being is the awareness to the world. A human being is the exploration of the origin of your existential and experiential awareness. And that is perhaps the greatest secret, which it will be a secret if you seek it externally, but when you go within, it was always your secret. And so individual consciousness will prosper through the remembrance of the prosperity that is always the collective consciousness. That means we must be selfless and very respectful, and also a respectful that is sharp and efficient, and that is immediately not letting a lot of preserving a human intelligence from a mechanical institution of imagery, because even mechanics is evolving. So the evolution is that the truth of this universe is that the universe is expanding. Once that I heard that the universe is expanding, I'm like, all right, I don't need to read any, get any lessons about this cosmos. You know, that was a very playfully I was saying that the vastness, what I am within is expanding. So why am I getting bothered whether I know what to do or not? I must just be attentive to the profundity that is my intelligence and experience. You know how in video games it's very interesting. There's a character, right? And many people are steering this character. Well, for an instant, see what has stirred the character that is found in the mirror. Begin becoming curious and aware of the origin of your being. It is self-inquiry. And so Mr. Within is perhaps here to allow Gandhi's voice to echo into this context, meaning that you must also be non-violent in your self-inquiry. And so always you must realize it is important. The mystic knows that he is exploring the unknown, and so he is bringing all that he's aware of to the table of creation. Perhaps with the beauty in the faith that the idea of Moses had in that passage, the spiritual gem was an experiential knowing. There's this very profound story of this female sage back in the day, and she's just walking from town to town, and so there's this river, so she goes to walk in the river. As she's walking the river, she suddenly sees a very big ruby, like an actual ruby, like a ruby a lot of museums are probably searching, right? As she finds the ruby, she takes it and she feels like she needs to pick it up, and it just feels good, and she does. However, what happens is that she's crossing by a near town, some guy, some young kid, who was just coming from work with like some vegetables in his hands, he suddenly sees, this woman with the ruby, and he just, like, his heart stops for a second, and he runs up to the woman, and very politely, but in a very disturbing kind of way, as if like it's not really politeness, he says, "Can you give me that? Please give me that ruby now." And the female sage looks at this guy, and before any thought, her hands has already moved, and she gives it as if she's embracing the young man. And the young man begins to run. The young man's like, "Oh my God, I'm rich." And suddenly he drops the vegetables, and I guess, he also dropped his health. And he begins running, and he runs to his house, and he runs there and goes and sits down and just puts down the rock. And I'm sure he actually picked up the vegetables after. And he goes in and he puts the rock there. And as he puts the rock, he begins to see, for a minute, time and space stopping, and him as a being, wondering what just happened. And he sees that the treasure was not what was on the table. The treasure was in how that female sage, that realized an enlightened being, was so aware. That she was so selfless that she, in an instant, how could she in an instant give away such value? And was it truly an object of value? And so there came the wisdom of eons, entering a timeless temple of empty space. It is nature's liberation of reminding you, you are not alone, you are life force. As you remember, you have always been guided. And this remembrance is not in thought, it is actually a remembrance out of thought. It is not a comparison of story to another story, character to another character. It is the most deepest self-contemplative inquiry, where Mr. Within suggests, go in nature. Right now I'm sitting on a rock in the middle of like some kind of stream. And so simply this environment begins through my gentleness And there's no gentleness. I mean, that's a concept, but it's just like I'm here, and just how life is here with me begins to become a part of me, and I also become a part of reality. When you respect other people's reality, you are allowing yourself to be real in their eyes, and it is a very important task. We are all gurus to one another because we are always being introduced to each other's lives in new ways, And what is making friends but the exploration of how worlds come together to develop anew? Communication is a blessing and a tool, but you must not think the tool is a part of your hand, or you always carry it and feel why life is heavy. You must let go of and understand you can let go, but you can also utilize all that you are aware of. Your life has not been meaningless. You don't have to suddenly go do something that is not local to you. You must just see wherever you exist. Be aware of it. Allow the path of sincerity and the path of compassion and the path of honesty to guide you, and the path of self-inquiry. These are all one path. The remembrance that is beyond space and time, so there's no one to remember. But all that one can be, for when the cosmos is aware of the individual, it was never the individual that sees. For nature's beautiful secrets can always be heard by the heart that beats within. Much blessings and namaste.